I'm gonna share with you this morning a story that I've never publicly shared. It's a story that was passed on to me by a longtime Major League Baseball coach. And it's a story about a player, Major League Baseball player, who was actually quite a good and well-known player in his era. I'm gonna keep the names anonymous. But all I can tell you is that the player was an outfielder who was very, very fast. And he played for one of the marquee teams in Major League Baseball. And, according to the coach who actually coached him for some years, great guy, very good baseball player, great teammate, great guy, loved the fans, adored the kids. It was great to the kids. But as much as he, loved the game and he loved the fans and he loved his teammates and he loved the kids, he also loved horses. And the horses were putting a hole in his pocket because he couldn't stop betting on them. And the stories are legendary. You can't make them up. He had, this was commonplace. When they played at home, he would have his bookie sitting in the first row of the outfield, right behind the fence, so that while he was out there, he would give him bets to place at the harness races that were taking place at night. And the bookie, of course, would keep him up to speed if he was winning or losing, stuff like that. And something else that was routine was that whenever they had home games, if they happened to have a night game, he would spend the entire afternoon at the local racetrack. And it wasn't unusual that he would show up at the clubhouse before the game and tell the athletic trainer, I don't think I can play today. I don't think I can play. And the trainer would say, what's wrong? What do you feel? And he would say, I'm depressed. I'm too depressed. I blew $5,000 at the track this afternoon. And the trainer would get on the phone, call the owner, and would say, hey boss, by the way, if you happen to be a diehard baseball fan, that should give you a tip, as to what team we're talking about. He would say, hey boss, so-and-so says he can't play today. He says he's depressed. He's very depressed. And the owner would say, well, how depressed is he? He said, he's about $5,000 depressed. And then the owner would send an envelope with cash to the clubhouse. And the trainer would give it to him, and then he would say, oh, I'm feeling better. I think I'm good to go. I think I'm good to go. Well, this came to a climax one night when he had received one of those such envelopes with God knows how many $100 bills were in there. But he took the money out of the envelope and he stuffed the $100 bills in the back pocket of his uniform. And during the game, I think he got walked, and he attempted to steal second base. And as he slid into second base, some of the $100 bills came out of his pocket. Now, when the catcher threw to second to get him out, the catcher overthrew second base and the ball went out into center field. And rather than making a V-line for third base on the overthrow, he decided to chase the $100 bills that came out of his pocket, which were flying into center field, and he got tagged out in center field. You can't make it up. You can't make it up. I mean, ridiculous, absurd. To forego, right? Eventually trying to get home, which is what the game is all about. Scoring as big and as much as possible, and compromising that to go after some petty stuff. Well, listen, we do the same thing quite often. We do the same thing quite often. We so often lose sight of what the game of life, of what the goal of life is all about. And we compromise it because we're chasing after realities, and sometimes realities that are good. They're not necessarily bad, but realities that are clearly, they're good, but they're clearly not as enriching as what God invites us to embrace, to go where God calls us to go to. This is nothing new, which is why Jesus gave this parable, right, to his listeners a couple thousand years ago. Why it's given to us. This is an age-old challenge. This parable of, you heard it, right? The wedding feast that people are invited to. And listen, back in those days, being invited to a wedding feast was like what they rolled out on a wedding. What they rolled out was like the best of the best of the best of the best. It was, you were nuts to forego an invitation like that. Yet, you hear some people, right? No, I got to go take care of this responsibility, or I have to go take care of family. I have to go take care of business. They're not bad things that they're trying to engage in, but nearly not as great as what they are being invited to. Nearly not as great as this abundance of life, right, that they were being called to. And the same thing happens to us. God wants to lead us to a life which is far more fulfilling than we imagine. You'd be amazed what God can do with us, where he can take us, what he can provide for us that we don't expect. Yet we so often, we miss that because we're so caught up in a lot of other realities. Some sometimes not so healthy, others very healthy and very good, but we miss what the game is all about. We miss what the ultimate purpose is all about. And the reason we miss it is because we really give, God is like an afterthought. Quite often, we don't give God the time. We don't give God the time. Now, here, listen, you're here this morning, so you got it right this morning, right? Some of you are, regulars, some come and go, right? But what happens, quite often, I hear it all the time. Well, we couldn't make Mass, and it's not just about Mass, but Mass is integral, right? We couldn't make it because we had this, or we had that, or, we had a tournament and we had to go. Well, listen, all those other things are good. They're not bad. And we have so many Mass options, not just here at Epiphany, everywhere, right? There's a lot of possibilities. Yet, we get tired, we mismanage situations, we lose perspective. Quite often, say, well, I need to pray. We go through our day, we go tackling the things that we need to tackle during the day, business, responsibilities at home, with children, with spouses, with parents, whatever the case may be. By the time we get to God, if we get there, we snore our way through God. God gets our snoring pretty much, and when we don't make some time to reflect with God, we're going to miss out. We miss out on the invitations that he is extending before us. Listen, about 10 years ago or so, Archbishop Wensky gave me a side assignment, which was to coordinate a yearly event that took place with the church in Cuba, the church from Cuba. There would be a delegation. We would have a week-long event of meetings and sharing. You know, a delegation from the church in Cuba, a bishop, clergy, lay people, and I would coordinate a delegation from here. And it was a beautiful exchange thing to find out what was happening in the church in Cuba and how we could best help them. As a result of my being engaged in that, when President Obama, before he visited Cuba, they summoned some local business leaders, religious leaders, to advise as to what he should say when he went to the island. I got flagged into that group, and lest anybody get any funny thoughts, here was my main advice to the president was, whatever you say down there, if you don't acknowledge the pain that the Cubans who came to exile, the Cuban Americans that live here, if you don't acknowledge the pain that the Cuban community on this side has gone through as a result of all that has taken place and continues to take place over there, you will have no credibility with anyone of Cuban descent in this country. That was my feedback. So anyway, that happened, and about a year later, you know, as I was so engaged in the duties that I have to undertake as a pastor, I was at the other parish. I was at Our Lady of the Lakes at the time, and I was dealing with, you know, the parish, a high school that I was supervising at the time, a few other responsibilities, and I was going through email like a rocket. You know, I was like, took me a couple of months. Took one final email basically saying this is last call. And I finally realized what this was, and I thankfully responded at the last second. I was getting emails from the White House that I was deleting. I thought they were junk emails. And they were basically extending an invitation to go to the White House. This was during the transition to the new administration, and provide some whatever future perspectives as to how things with that policy should go and whatnot. I had a phone call from a friend who was involved in all that, and he said, "I'm glad you finally responded. I thought you were gonna chuck the invitation." And I said I had no idea I was getting invited. I thought it was all junk. And I got to tell you, you know, I went, and that's a story for another day. Had a working day there. And, you know, I remember in the midst of all that, I was saying to myself, what am I doing here? Why on earth am I here? I never in my life expected to, you know, have an experience like that. But it goes to show you that, you know, the Lord wants to extend to us experiences of different types. The Lord wants to take us places in our life, and I'm not just talking about physical places. I'm talking about certain experience, certain realities that we come into contact with, which are beyond our imagining, are far more extensive and fulfilling than we imagine. Hopefully we don't delete those invitations. May the Lord help us. May the Lord help us, give us a reality check as to what the ultimate purpose of this life, what the ultimate purpose of this game is all about, so that we can score big in life, and so that we won't get caught in center field chasing petty cash or petty nonsense. My dear friends, let us stand and profess the faith that clarifies the purpose of our lives. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible